Hi, this is Dr. Nick. I'm the Incrementalist here with Incremental Insights for better business, better health.
And I'm Fred Goldstein with Accountable Health, here helping employers look at their employee benefits programs and improving employee health both post COVID as well as the broader issues impacted by how they offer those benefits and health plans. So let's start this week, Nick. We're starting to see this whole issue of masks and no longer being required to wear them. So, how are you dealing with this?
So I want to title this episode "Mask On, Mask Off." If I'm channeling my Karate Kid, and I am definitely in the mask off category. In the recent days, in fact, in the local space, we have relinquished the masking requirements essentially at a state level. There was some variation, a little bit of delay in county level, but essentially mask off at this point. And that has now permeated throughout the whole of the state. There are certainly some exceptions. I think in the metro, they're still requiring it, maybe in federal buildings. And there's wide variation, and we experienced it over the weekend. Number one, I'm stuck in traffic. I haven't been stuck in traffic in over a year. So everything feels like it's back to normal. And I'm in different places, and I'm taking my mask off. I am entirely comfortable taking my mask off. I am fully vaccinated. My family is fully vaccinated. And based on the science, I feel completely at ease. And that's true in my gym. And I can tell you, the day that happened, I was with a group of people and they pretty much ripped their mask off. That was in the gym. Interestingly, this weekend, what I saw, and I was really surprised, was in places where the mask mandate had been lifted, and not every business has done that. We were certainly in some different businesses where they hadn't, but let's pick the Home Depot. They have essentially removed the sign. So they didn't put a sign saying no mask required. So they're not being quite that overt about it, but they've removed the sign. And I'm happy to take. I was in a tiny minority of individuals, and I looked around, everybody still wearing masks outside, and certainly across the board. I probably saw two people in the Home Depot, and I saw lots of folks whilst I was in there. I'm entirely comfortable. Fred, you're at the other end of the spectrum. Why should we still be wearing masks?
It's a great question. So what this gets to is, as we've always talked about, there's the science and then there's the other, right? And so the science, you're right. The science says if you've been vaccinated, you're very unlikely to get infected. And if you do, it's typically going to be very light, if at all. And so it now becomes a psychological issue. And have been wearing masks for a long time. I still wear them indoors. As a matter of fact, it's a funny little story. I was up, moving my son back from college, and I walked into the frat house to go ahead and use the restroom, and I realized I hadn't stuck my mask on, and I got a little nervous, and so I quickly put it on. But it's going to be fascinating to watch how this progresses over time. There are clearly individuals who are going to continue to wear masks. Here in Florida, we haven't had the mask mandate. Some stores are saying recommended. We're still seeing a decent number in the stores, but obviously a lot more without. The question becomes, how many people in a given community have been vaccinated? And obviously certain states are ahead of others, or communities are ahead of others. And that, I think, is sort of the critical issue. But it'll be fascinating to watch over time what happens with individuals, myself included. Will I begin to get a little less nervous and stop wearing a mask? Because obviously the science says it works. And fascinatingly, along these lines, Israel's going to lift all restrictions for vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals. Green paths will go, and you're going to be able to do activities. So essentially, all of the individuals who have chosen to vaccinate are making it better for everybody else.
Right, and let's focus in on that and clarify. So from a mask mandate, the guidance is still pretty clear. If you have been fully vaccinated, so you've either had both doses or you had the single dose J&J, and you're 2 weeks post, then you are not required to wear a mask, except in specific circumstances. If you haven't, you are still supposed to wear your mask, but there is no way of really validating that because no industry or business as yet, I know certainly some are thinking about this. I know we're hearing about this from conferences and, questions about that. And, we're not going to dive into that today, but you're essentially taking on trust. And I recognize that there are clearly people in that group who take their mask off that may well not have been vaccinated. But here's my perspective on that based on the science. Yes, there may be individuals in the community that I'm in who have no mask on but have not been vaccinated. So they're at slightly higher risk. But number of things factor in. One, highly unlikely because we've seen this massive decline, both in the number of cases, testing continues, certainly in hospitalization and so forth. Two, we also know that from a vaccinated standpoint, I am much more resistant. And even if I do catch it, I'm likely to be asymptomatic. So I may get the disease and not even know it because it doesn't show up from symptom. I've got no symptoms to indicate unless I test, which I'm not doing. And then if I do get symptoms, they're typically mild. And my potential, importantly, and I think this is something else I heard from others where, if you have people at risk in your community, so if you have young children who can't be vaccinated, obviously people are worrying in a different way, but your capacity, so if I get the disease, and I'm asymptomatic, so I don't know, or I even have mild symptoms and I'm not sure. Interestingly, the data shows that we don't spread it because it doesn't appear in the nasopharynx. It's not there in sufficient dose to be able to spread it. So those are all, for me, sufficient reasons. And I recognize the groupthink and the impact of other people's behavior that influences. But I've always been a free spirit and I am, I'm taking my science to the extreme. And I got to be honest, I hate masks. I always wanted to take them off, but I always advocated them based on the science. But now I'm saying I'm happy taking them off.
And let me add one critical piece for all of the folks who are in health and healthcare, us included. When you go to see your doctor or the hospital, please don't argue, wear a mask. They've been living this disease. They've been helping us, doing incredible things, and it's still a requirement. So go with that, please.
And I would just add to that, my attitude here is also very clear. I'm not going to have a row about it. I carry my mask with me. The only time I don't have my mask is because I forgot. Let's be frank. If you guys are not offering me a mask to help me, because I forgot it, then, there's a minor problem there. But I do try and remember, but occasionally I forget. Even in the peak of this, I forgot. I will never argue. I just, it's not worth the row. And it's, respectful to others. I'm trying to do. Now, if I felt symptomatic, then I would put a mask on. Or in fact, I would stay at home, which is something we potentially learned. So there's some good news out of all of this. We're behaving slightly differently. We might see flu as a minor issue with few people getting it because of all of this. That would be great, right?
That would be fantastic. And we'll see how long it takes for me to get like you, Nick. So once again, another fantastic week. This is Fred Goldsmith with Accountable Health. Thanks so much for watching this. And if you'd like more information, please go to accountablehealthllc.com.
And this is Dr. Nick. I'm the Incrementalist here with Incremental Insights for better business, better health.